Welcome to a podcast which we're calling Radical Grace on the Economy. It is based on a workbook called Radical Grace on the Economy, which is up online at radicalgrace.ca. And it's a discussion workbook where we have Jyoti and I, you can see Jyoti Noel and I are the co-hosts, and we have one or two guests every session. Today we have a friend of mine, well, a Zoom friend, David Franks. We've only met on Zoom. We've become good friends on Zoom. Why don't we start with Jyoti? How about introducing yourself? Who the heck are you?
Yeah, so I ask that question every day. Thank you, Gary. So Gary and I know each other through the Franciscan community. We're both third order Franciscans, and we have met in various capacities at conferences and discussions and so forth. So that has kind of brought us together. And I'm not an economist. I'm probably an anti-economist, given that I have numeric dyslexia, but I'm very much interested in how culture and society works and functions. And I thought that your title of your workbook, Radical Grace and the Economy, just sounded very endearing to me that I wanted to pursue any opportunity for discussion about that. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, Gary and David. And I just, I never know how it's going to go, but that's okay.
That's absolutely okay. David, can you give
Yes.
a bit of an introduction?
Well, it's good to get to know you, Jyoti, and it's good to renew our friendship, Gary. My name is David Franks. I'm a priest of 39 years, and I have been in a variety of different small churches, and currently am an honorary assistant at Trinity Anglican Church in Aurora, Ontario. I was also a social worker for 20 years in child protection and recently retired in 2019. I'm a father of three children. They're all adults now, and I have one grandson, and here I am on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. My first degree was in sociology at Queen's University, and I had the pleasure of studying under a professor who was well grounded in the critical theory, uh, a school of sociology established in Frankfurt, Germany. And what we worked at was looking at Karl Marx's writings and applying that knowledge to the political economies of Russia and China. And I come from a background where my paternal grandfather was a coal miner outside of Birmingham, England, and my maternal grandfather worked in Birmingham. It's great to be here. I've got to know Gary through an initiative by the National Indigenous Anglicans, where we gather and look at the scriptures in a unique way, trying to establish what the scriptures, the gospels are saying to us, what the good news is. And it's a privilege to listen and learn from the Indigenous participants there.
I often build the workshop as Franciscan/Indigenous economics, feeling that there's a lot of common ground. Jyoti, do you have any questions to ask him about what he does?
No, it sounds like you're very well connected and well grounded in community. Newfoundlanders are like that. We're very much about when two Newfoundlanders would meet each other, they would often say, "Where do you belong?" In the past 30 years, we now say, "Where do you live or where you're from?" But originally, we would always say, "Where do you belong?" Because even though we were white Europeans who settled here mostly from the British Isles, we still belonged to a place, a sense of place and space, which means community. So I'm really happy to be looking at this section in Gary's book today on denial of community in the economic sphere, because I think David and I certainly have a strong sense of place. I'm not saying you don't, Gary, but I gather from David's discussion that he has a strong sense of knowing who he is and where he is.
Yeah. Now, David, I gave you a choice from this workbook. There's 9 sections. I gave you a choice which one you wanted to talk about, and you chose number 4, denial of community. So maybe we could start with, why did you choose that one?
It's an interesting question and a good question. I have always had a passion for caring for people as individuals, and either as a pastor or as a social worker with people who are disconnected from their communities and looking for connections, looking for a sense of belonging, looking to build supports around them. And my job as a pastor and as a social worker has always been to help people discover what their strengths are and what supports are available in the community in order to help them with some of the issues that they face, some of the impediments that they experience, and some of the things they'd like to change and turn around in their lives. I also know what it's like to observe people who are well connected and work at helping people develop connections in community and discover the healing that comes from belonging and being recognized and having your strengths affirmed and just being accepted as a unique individual. But I find that fascinating.
Jyoti, I have a sense that Newfoundland is very much community oriented, perhaps more than other provinces. Would you think?
Yeah, well, I don't know about elsewhere because I wouldn't presume to speak for elsewhere. I just know that a former constitutional lawyer under the former Trudeau government, Senator Eugene Forsey, he said Newfoundlanders are very clannish. You might even say tribal, but you can't, it's not appropriate to say that because we're not Indigenous, but we can certainly be clannish insofar as, yes, we have a strong sense of relationship with others and with the place. Yeah. So what David is saying, my heart is there. So when I see a section in your book called Denial of Community, it's like, how can something like that exist? How can there be anything active in the world which denies community? And when you say economics does, I have trouble seeing that.
I was talking about how we as a Canadian culture in general largely are fanatically individualist. And like when Margaret Thatcher is famous for saying, there's no such thing as society. There's only individuals. So I'll ask you a question out of that. If you were sitting across the table having coffee, well, maybe tea with Margaret Thatcher, and she said, there's no such thing as society, but only individuals, what would you say?
I would say that such a sense of radical individualism is a very harmful perspective, largely because we're shaped by the generations who have gone before us, and we inherit some of the good things and some of the other not so good things as well. And each generation has to sort out how they're going to live, how they're going to exist as a community together, and what's going to be important. So I would take someone like that and say, it's an interesting amongst Indigenous people that they develop strong relationships with each other because they are grounded in having a relationship to Creator and having a relationship with the land and all of the other relatives that are both more than human and human as well. And that's interesting because when you go and you have your spirit name given to you, it's my understanding that the elder takes some time to pray and to think about who you are, who your family is, who the ancestors in that family have been, and what their strengths and what their roles are in the community, and comes up with a vision and a name that describes the spirit of the person. And certainly some people have more than one spirit name, but the importance of a spirit name is that this is part of who you are and how you connect with not only others in your indigenous community, but also the other human, the more than human beings that exist in creation. And so you're always part of a very complex web of relationships. That's just how we are. And human beings are the last to be created by Creator.
Mm.
And so we have all of these teachers and all of these relatives who teach us how to care for ourselves, care for the community, how to live on the land and on the waters, and use the abundance that Creator provides for us. But in the sense, you are a unique individual with gifts and strengths that only you can provide to the community. So you have this wonderful understanding of being radically an individual and also belonging to a people, not just a nuclear family, not just a set of parents, but to a people with a history going generations, thousands of years before. And you're hopefully making decisions in what you're doing and what you're saying as it would impact your grandchildren's grandchildren. So to just understand yourself as an individual, and that the way to see the world is a collection of individuals, to me, it rings so much with a colonial understanding of what it means to be a person, what it means to be a human being, what it means to be a community. That it's really an impoverishment just to claim that each individual is unique and that we are a collection of individuals. We're much more than that, and that has how Creator has created us. We have such a complex web of relationships, and I think it's one of the interesting pieces, because where we look at Christianity and go, how did we get lost? How did we get to a point where we were operating from a hierarchy of peoples, so that those who are non-Christian, those who are pagan, those who are indigenous are at the bottom and aren't even considered to be human, and when newcomers and settlers came to this part of Turtle Island and believed in that legal fiction that no one was living on the land, and that those folk didn't have a relationship with Creator, they were totally off base. how did we get to be that way as Christians? Is I think a question for us to think about. Certainly, the piece about living in community is and being part of a community and being a unique person in a community is a much healthier and more wholesome way of looking at who we are.
Yeah, there's a balance that way, engaging with community and being an individual yourself. I'm thinking, Jody, you're at the table too, and someone else across the table says, I don't want to be bound by the requirements of society. I'm a free person. I have the right to do whatever I want. And maybe he's going to take a convoy to Ottawa or something to prove that. But if that kind of person across the table from you was saying, I'm not bound by community, how would you answer?
How we come to pit individual versus community, I guess, is a poor development of society and culture. The idea we can pit one against the other, that somehow they are separate. I just can't fathom that understanding. I don't think it's rational. I don't think it's consistent. I think it's an inconsistent deviation from a healthy understanding of culture and society. And by the way, I would say to Margaret Thatcher, why did people living on an island in the United Kingdom, decide to take back the Falklands from Argentina if there's no such thing as society? Why didn't they just let it go? It's because there was societal connection, a cultural connection over time, which she felt had to be maintained. So sometimes people make radical statements which really don't make, because you say something doesn't mean it makes sense or that it's true. And I think that the pitting individualism against community is just it's a deviation from our understanding of persons and person. And if we go back, to Genesis, God created in the myth of creation, God created a family, people, not just a person. And he didn't want them to be alone. And then Jesus, the first thing he did was gather a group around him. Jesus as eternal word, the first thing he did was he gathered people, men and women around him, and so our concept of our corporate concept is very much a part of who and what we are. And I just find that I'm challenged when we separate individual from community, because I think that's a separation that's very difficult to maintain. Having said that, I'm grateful for the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, protecting the rights of persons. But all of this is in the context of the Canadian society and culture. It's in the context of a society and culture within each province, within each area of the country. So, I'm just not comfortable with that separation. The other thing is that when you say economics denies community, in economics, don't you need a producer and a consumer? Don't you need someone to produce a product to sell and a consumer to purchase? And doesn't that denote a relationship, a community? Like when because you write these radical things, Gary, and I'm not sure I understand.
One of the questions you're raising is the market a society? Is the market a community? The economics profession says no, the market is just a bunch of radical individuals who are pursuing their own selfish interests. And then the market turns them into angels. The market forces them to cooperate with each other. The market makes them interact with each other as if they're a community. But economics says no, they are radical individuals. And they are cooperating with each other essentially against their will. And the market makes them cooperate with each other. So there's a question of whether you call that a society or not.
There are hierarchical societies where
Yeah.
people with wealth and power rise to the top and rule and exert that power and authority and maintain their wealth and their properties and engage in a journey of increasing their wealth and increasing their land base in a hierarchical society. I think it's fascinating because when I read the Gospels, I see and hear Jesus letting us know that Creator is a great spirit. It gives us an abundance with which to live off the land and the waters, and that we are sustained. Every bit that we need in life is given from the land and the waters. I find it fascinating that prior to contact, there was an extensive trade relationships from coast to coast, to coasts, north and south and west. And amazing, considering the mode of transportation was either by foot or in a canoe. Extensive. So the marketplace was there, and there were goods and services, and as well knowledge and innovations with tools that got traded back and forth. But when you're in a marketplace where goods and services and knowledge and tools are exchanged, when your relationship to Creator and to the gifts of Mother Earth are one where gratitude and reciprocation are values, and there's a built-in peace where, as peoples made treaties with each other, they talked about how those treaties would change each other and put themselves in relationships so that your community all of a sudden got to be a much larger community, interaction with a much larger community. So it's a very interesting perspective, and mutual aid, peace and harmony and mutual aid were the foundations of this economy. Very complex and amazing. And when I read the stories of Jesus, I hear over and over again the need for people to develop communities of faith and connect with other communities of faith and exchange knowledge and ideas and at times support for each other when there's times of famine and where other communities are experiencing a wealth of gifts from Mother Earth. It's a fascinating way to look at how we can develop economies that really reflect the values that produce life and create life and generate a sense of reciprocity and well-being.
The next question, I want to take it to you, David, because I've done sessions based on this workbook before at St. Margaret's Anglican Church in Winnipeg, and David attended some of those sessions by Zoom. And David, you phoned me up and you had some suggestions. Well, actually, I phoned you back one of the suggestions was that some of this is a little bit abstract. And you're right. And you suggested maybe I should be making some more personal questions about how people approach these. So I've done that, and I put a few of them in. And so I'm gonna throw your idea back at you, because one of the kind of questions you're talking about, how do you personally strike that balance between individual freedom and responsibility to community? How do you live your life in that way?
Because Creator continues to nourish not only myself but every other human being and all of the more than human beings as well, and the spirits are strong. I think there is always, in gathering with people, if there's respect and a desire for peace and a desire to care for each other and a desire to celebrate the gifts that are there, I would say that it's very important for us to develop relationships, all kinds of relationships, and to be open to learning from all kinds of teachers, both more than human and human. And in that, our own individual journey, as we walk the road and take one step and put it in front of the other with the light and the vision that we experience, because we know Creator, as Creator's loving kindness is awesome and abundant, and that each one of us is created in that image of Creator, to be generous, to be loving. That's the place to start. So for strengths, you're looking for unique ways in which individuals can contribute to the health and well-being of the community. For a while, I did some work in between my work as a full-time incumbent and as a full-time social worker. I did a bit of work for a couple of years with some interesting adults with developmental disabilities that needed caregiving support. It's always been fascinating. I met my wife when we were child and youth workers, and we were working with very difficult children who had been, their behaviors were such that they kept being moved from place to place to place, and our treatment facility was a place where we accepted everyone unconditionally. And that's hard work. And it's hard work to be able to be open and inclusive and realize that no matter what people's life experiences are or what their abilities are, each has gifts to give and share. And that, to me, is an important beginning and an important way of living together. I'm not wanting to set somebody as more important and somebody is less important, or somebody has got more resources and somebody who's got less resources, but that we're all equal, and we can get a lot of joy and strength. I used to work at Native Child and Family Services in Toronto for 12 years and would come across some horrendous life experiences that parents had, grandparents had, and children were experiencing. And for me, one of the things that I got involved with was the church school. from grades 6 to 12 in at Trinity. And there were a lot of amazing kids there. And they had great gifts and great strengths and wanted to understand this creator of abundance and this creator who is generous and this creator who loves beyond all understanding. And it was, and it's like going and spending time here so that my daughter and her husband can go to work. For my wife and I spent 3 days with a 10-month-old child now, and that's our therapy. And not only do we get some physiotherapy because we have to get up and down off the floor so many times, and we're often crawling on the floor with him as well, but there's something about making a connection with children and youth who are open to trying to understand the wonders and the mystery of creation, and particularly of human beings. And that's renewing. So as a starting point, I'd have to say you have to develop, I guess, this way of life that is inclusive, and that you appreciate that Creator is leading you on a path that will introduce you to all kinds of fabulous people, some with more pain than others, and some more damaged by life experiences or have more limitations physically. But everyone that you meet is a gift from the Creator too.
Jody, any thoughts on that?
We had a band in Newfoundland years ago called Great Big Sea, and they had many hits. They
Yes.
stole the show at a lot of award ceremonies. They were very popular, very successful. And one of their songs was, "I Want to Be Consequence Free." And I think that people who feel oppressed all the time or a lot would strive for individual freedom from oppression. And I think that many people who are poor, many average income people, have lived in an oppressed state for a long period of time. And the desire to be free of oppression creates in us a desire for individual freedom. And that translates into a society and cultural peace that we're contending with. It doesn't have to be contrary to community, but maybe the community that oppressed them needs to be transformed into a loving and a caring community. And while the Indigenous people have many things to teach us about the strengths and the value of that, there have been bits and pieces of that in the settler culture, but it has not been affirming, it has not been transformative, and the church has been part of that. So when you say all people are, the only thing people are concerned about today is individual freedom, I think part of that comes from an extended time of feeling oppressed, where you don't have freedom. But the idea that individual freedom is contrary to community life, that's not just an extreme, deviation from a whole sense of a healthy community. But I can appreciate why some people are only interested in individual freedom. It's because of a culture of oppression that has been kept and maintained to their disadvantage.
Oh, that leads to the next question, and I'll stick with you, Jody. Initially, a culture that has become obsessed with individual freedom. How do we turn that around? I mean, we have all people were supporting this freedom convoy to Ottawa, or a whole lot of people were. And there were people who were saying freedom is the only thing that's important. We're here for freedom, 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 and no talk about responsibility. If we've got a culture that is obsessed with freedom and and think freedom trumps responsibility. How do you change that culture? How do you get people thinking of the balance between freedom and responsibility?
First of all, you have to remove the visible forms of oppression. You have to make an effort to address, oppression and affirm the value of the person. And we're not there yet. We may be headed there. I mean, the ship may be in that direction, but we're not there yet. So as a result of that, we get things happening like you just referenced. But even those people travel in community to protest, dependent on others to finance them. I mean, it's a strong sense of community there. It's not about individual. I mean, I don't see one rationally pitted against another to be rational thought. There are bits and pieces which will lead to such things. But part of that, I think, is the respect for person, to allow the person to freedom, to live in community. And when there's oppression, we get a warped sense of who we are and what's really important and what we need to fight against. And I think that the church has not always been a shining light in that regard, because the church has been in the party of the oppressors. So the challenge for Christians is to, I think, understand and honor the past for truth seeking, to recognize where we are today, and to discern a willingness where a future includes the affirmation of everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's a big challenge, because that's not something a lot of people are interested in right now.
Thank you. David, I'm sure you have a take on
that. Certainly, we look at some really horrible conflicts that are going on right now. And where can people get to so that we can all work on peace and building relationships and reducing violence? It takes a lot of people who have experienced various forms of oppression and affliction to band together and say, we want to do things differently. We want to care for our planet. We want to bring peace to places where there has been warfare and destruction, and there's open hatred that's causing even more pain. And you read the teachings of Jesus, the Gospels, and you can get a different understanding of what Creator, Great Spirit, Eternal Word, Creator sets free has for us as human beings. And the more people interact and take small steps to dismantle cycles of violence, the healthier our communities are going to be, and the more we can move along. So we have to look at our Christianity and say, hey, for a long time, we believed that Christianity equaled our Western culture. We also had movements within that Christianity that said, no, that's not true. What's real is that we're all equal and we're all loved equally by Creator, and that Jesus gives us, Creator sets free, gives us ways of doing things differently and the energy, the creative energy to do that. And that's, as people look at deconstructing their experiences of oppression and we want to reconstruct families and communities of creation that are inclusive, that celebrate diversity, but healthy diversity, diversity that builds and brings life, not a diversity where it brings death and destruction and hierarchical structures that contribute to ongoing racism and oppression. I think we live in an amazing time, and we've always lived in amazing times. There's been violence and destruction, and people have caused harm to each other and to, particularly in the last 500 years, to this planet. And part of that's dealing with consequences. When you're raising children, you want to teach them natural and logical consequences. You also want to teach them how to de-escalate violence and anger and frustration within yourself, also with other people that are close to you, and make improvements so that there are alternatives. People don't have to be violent and rigid, but can be more open and experimentative and learn from each other. Indigenous peoples have these things called talking circles that are absolutely powerful as learning experiences, but they're also very interesting tools in terms of conflict resolution. How do you bring peace? How do you work out and negotiate what the next steps will be for everybody in that circle? And ceremonies are a really important part of all of that. Smudging and pipe smoking and listening to, once in a while, elders speak. It's a fabulous experience. But it's based in a spirituality that is so rich. And I think Christians, settlers and newcomers, need to understand the wealth of that spirituality and what it will mean to walk a road together, and a road that brings life, not destruction and pain and more anguish.
Well, that is great, and that's a perfect way to wrap it up. I thank you very much, David, for giving us the time and giving us the thought. I know you've been thinking about this before we even started, and I'm very much appreciative of that. And I'm appreciative of Jody working with me on this and for making your contributions. This is the first session being recorded with a guest. There will hopefully be many more, but we don't have a schedule. Actually, Jody, you and I are going to have to get together one-on-one to decide where we go from here. But welcome to the end of the first one.
Can I say thank you? I really appreciated being on the same screen with two Franciscans. I have a profound respect for St. Francis of Assisi and the movement that has come from that in terms of trying to practice generosity and loving kindness and peace.
So maybe we can recruit you, eh? Okay.
Might be an easy job.
David, I've enjoyed meeting you today, and I really feel that I have been exposed to a really deep and important part of your spirit, of what makes you, you, and what makes you special and unique. And I really want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you. And Gary for organizing it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll be organizing another one soon. To the audience, bye-bye. See you later.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.